this place, we spend Canadians' money. It doesn't come from us, it comes from them. When we make decisions around program expenditures, we are spending Canadians' money. What we discuss in this place is how we do that and why we do that and to what level we should do that and how it benefits the economy. But at the end of the day, we are spending people's money. This is money that they earned. So it really behooves us to be accountable to them on how we're doing that. There was a question that just came up in debate about why this motion is important. It's important to the people who give us their money, who entrust us here to make decisions on how we spend their money, because it sets the stage for the government's narrative on how much money they're actually spending. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, is that this year's fiscal monitor stated, and these are department officials, there are public service, they're people that across the aisle people would cite over and over again in the previous parliament. Their research, their analysis shows that this government was left in a surplus position. That should be important to the people who give us their money and entrust us on how to spend it. Why? Because what we're hearing from across the aisle is that there is no end in sight in government spending. That should concern all Canadians because we don't have the money to pay for what they're expending. Every day across this country, people make decisions on how they spend their money. They try to make ends meet. They make decisions on if they're going to be able to put their kids in a sporting program, how they're going to pay their rent. These are decisions that everybody has to make, and they make a decision on whether or not they can afford to do that. That choice is what's important. So for the government to continually sitting in this House and saying, well, we're already in a deficit position, so let's just spend to high heaven, that is a problem for Canadians. They should be paying attention to that. What we are asking government members to do today is something that they should take heart to. They should look at the fact that the statistics and the research of government officials show that we are in a surplus position. Ergo, any of the big deficit position that they put us in is their choice. It is their choice, and they need to be accountable to Canadians on that. This is about accountability, Mr. Speaker. They should have to go to their constituents and say, guess what? I put you in a $50 billion deficit position this year. I mortgaged your children's future. And they should be able to explain to their constituents why they're doing that. During the campaign, we didn't hear a lot of why from the government. We didn't hear a lot of, here's why we want to go into deficit. To quote my colleague opposite in the last round of questions, he said, deficits can be a good thing. What he should have said, and this belies the underlying philosophy of the Liberals, is here's why we want to make this program expenditure, and here's how we predict it's going to affect the economy, X, Y, and Z. No, they're focusing on spending, spending, spending. And that spending comes out of the wallets of the people that we represent. And we have to be accountable for that, Mr. Speaker. And there's a huge fallacy that they put in place when they talk about we can spend our way out of a bad situation over and over and over again. I want to direct my colleagues' attention to the annual fiscal tables, Table 3. If you look at the revenues that have come into the federal, and this is just straight up revenues, it's millions of dollars. If you look at that over the last 10 years, you'll notice that the last year we actually as a government had, I think, if I'm reading this table correctly, one of the highest levels of revenue coming into the country, into the government coffers for expenditures. However, we did that while the federal tax burden was at its lowest level in 50 years. So we had a high level of government revenue coming in, yet Canadians, those people that give us their money, were paying less taxes to us. And why is that, Mr. Speaker? It's because when people have more of their own money in their pockets, the economy grows. They're better off, Mr. Speaker. So at the heart of this motion, the Liberals need to admit that they were left in a surplus situation, and now they need to go to Canadians and tell them why They're going into a massive deficit situation of their own choosing, Mr. Speaker, with, and here's the rub, here is the big rub, no plan to get out of it. They should be able to tell them. They should be able to say, you know what, in 2 or 3 years, here's how these program expenditures are going to bring us back on track. What do we have instead? The rhetoric that we get instead out of this government is, let's make a checklist of absolutely everything that we can do to hamper the Canadian economy right now. Point in case. Last night, the Prime Minister of this country was in Calgary, and he was asked a very simple question. He was asked if the National Energy Board, so our regulator that's in charge of conducting an arm's-length scientific review process for major infrastructure projects, if the National Energy Board green-lights the Energy East pipeline, will your cabinet approve it? Reader's Digest notes on his comments, which were long and obfuscating, is "we'll see." Shame. What he said in this to a job-creating company is, you know what, forget investing billions of dollars into the review process, into, going to your investors and your workers and saying, you know, we're going to take a risk and we're going to build some job-creating infrastructure in here. Forget the sanctity and the scientific review process here. I don't know. Maybe we'll approve it, maybe we won't. It's up to me. That puts a chill on investment. That is what drives down government revenues over time, Mr. Speaker. So why is it important to support this motion? It's important because we left them in a surplus position. That's right. They should have to go to Canadians. They should have to go and tell them why we are in a deficit position of inordinate magnitude. You know, during the campaign, they said that their platform was fully costed. We're already at the point where they're well over that. Just on the one area of responsibility I'm responsible for talking about in the House, the Syrian Refugee Initiative. That platform wasn't fully costed, not even close. They have an accountability to Canadians. Now, I am happy here to stand up and argue in this place on how we spend Canadians' money. But don't lie to them. Don't tell them that they're in a deficit situation when we're not. Don't tell them that government officials that they use to produce their budgets and their projections are wrong all the time, Mr. Speaker. How else are we supposed to be accountable to Canadians? That's right. For every Liberal that is going to stand up in this House and vote against this motion, I hope that all of their constituents write to them and say, why would you lie to me about the position that we're in? Right. Why would you do that? Hear, hear. At least be honest with me about how you're taking my money and spending it. You know, Mr. Speaker, what this government proposes to do in a time of economic downturn are things like increased premiums for the CPP. That is not what people need right now. They don't need more money coming off of their paycheck, Mr. Speaker. The same thing with increases in EI premiums. What that says to job-creating companies is, maybe I won't be able to hire another person because my operating expenditures are going up. When you raise taxes on job-creating companies, they have to make a choice on whether or not they can invest in a new project or hire more people, Mr. Speaker. Again, Table 3 in that report shows government revenue increased while the federal tax burden was at its lowest level in 50 years. Their logic is flawed, Mr. Speaker. They owe it to Canadians to be honest, and every single one of them who get up and vote against this in this place have a lot of explaining to do.
Hear, hear.
Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Saint-Maurice-Champlain. I would like to thank my honourable colleague for the story that she told Canadians. She's forgetting one thing, though. On October 19th, Canadians made a clear choice to elect a government that would invest in Canadians, in infrastructure, in our economy. I'm proud to say that I have consulted people in Quebec. I have consulted the people in Saint-Maurice-Champlain. I did some 15 consultations across the country, and the only people who believe their rhetoric is those members across the floor. The other Canadians know that they left us a deficit, and the only people who are trying to use our economic situation as a political toy are the Conservatives. They have added $150 billion to our national debt, and I would ask my colleague, why is she continuing to tell Canadians something that isn't right? We know the Canadians elected a new government to invest in the infrastructure and in Canadians. The international community and Canadians and economists all agree on this.
Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my colleagues' attention to page 175 of the federal budget table this year, 2015, charge 3.4.1. And if he looks at that, he'll see that a noticeable spike in 2004, and kind of know what started to happen then. But from 2006 onwards, the highest level of infrastructure investment in Canadian history by an order of magnitude. Like a significant, or I know in my home province in Alberta, we invested in our government multiple times more than Liberal government ever did. And here's the thing, Mr. Speaker. We did it while bringing the federal tax burden to its lowest level in over 50 years. Canadians have more money in their pocket because of us, and I really hope that the parliamentary secretary is going to really enjoy him telling Canadians over and over and over again why they're stealing their money.
Yeah.